I didn't say anything wrong. I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't complain. I was just quiet. I watched the sunset out the window while they played their games and laughed at inside jokes I was never part of. It was the annual summer trip, 12 of us crammed into 2 vans heading toward the coast. I had packed the snacks, helped load the bags, offered the front seat. And still, I was the one they picked on. "You're always so distant. Lighten up, it's just a joke. Stop being so sensitive." On the 4th day, they stopped at a rest area in the middle of nowhere. I went inside to use the bathroom. When I came back, the vans were gone. At first, I thought they'd just moved for parking, or maybe someone needed to run an errand. But then I found a note taped to the bench, written in my sister's handwriting. "Let's see if she can figure this one out." My chest went hollow. I looked around, hoping, praying it wasn't real, that they hadn't just left me, but they had. And what haunted me most wasn't the desert or the silence. It was the laughter I knew had followed them as they drove away. "My name is Riley. I didn't do anything wrong. And yet, they left me behind like I was a burden too heavy to carry." Before I share the rest of my story, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple listening in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. If this story means something to you, please hit subscribe. It tells the algorithm I'm not alone. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. If anyone had asked me to describe my life at 27, I'd probably have said it felt like being wallpaper in a room no one noticed anymore. I lived in the same tiny town in Utah where I'd grown up, stuck in a loop I couldn't seem to escape. I worked the counter at a local pharmacy, handing out allergy meds and greeting regulars who barely looked me in the eye, except when they recognized me from that viral TikTok. The one where my half-sister Bailey, in full makeup and perfect lighting, called me the family loser and got thousands of likes for it. Home wasn't much better. I shared a roof with my mom, Marcia, my stepfather, Clayton, and Bailey, who was Marcia's second child and the apple of their collective eye. Clayton ran a car dealership like he owned the town, and at home, he treated me like his in-house maid. Marcia? She floated in and out of her episodes, little performances where she'd retreat to bed, sigh dramatically, and let me take care of everything. Laundry, groceries, dinner, all of it. Sometimes she'd emerge just long enough to tell me I was making things worse by disrupting the energy of the home. Bailey didn't lift a finger. She didn't have to. Her life was curated online, makeup tutorials, prank videos, inspirational quotes from Pinterest, and she'd built a following doing it. Of course, I was often the punchline, like the time she filmed me scrubbing the bathroom floor and added a caption, "When you raise a daughter and a maid in one." The comments had ranged from laughing emojis to strangers diagnosing me with depression from a single clip. It would have been one thing if Marcia had defended me, told Bailey to knock it off. But she never did. She said things like, "Bailey's just trying to express herself," or, "Why do you always make everything so dramatic, Janelle?" She acted like keeping the peace meant pretending my feelings didn't exist, like my silence was the only thing holding this fragile house of cards together. And so I kept folding myself smaller and smaller, hoping maybe one day I'd disappear entirely, and someone would finally miss me. One night, after cleaning the kitchen for the 3rd time that day, I found myself organizing a drawer in the hallway cabinet. It was mostly old receipts and broken pens, but tucked between some envelopes was a photograph. Faded at the edges, bent at the corners. It was my dad. My real dad. He had warm, tired eyes and a gentle smile. In the photo, he was kneeling in the grass, his arm wrapped protectively around a tiny girl with curly brown hair and scraped knees. Me. I hadn't seen that photo in years, maybe ever. It felt like stumbling on a ghost I didn't realize I'd been searching for. I turned it over and froze. Scrawled in shaky handwriting on the back, my mother's, were the words, "Don't let her end up like him." The words hit me in the chest like a fist. What did that even mean? Who did she think he was? A failure? A disappointment? A warning? I stared at those 7 words for what felt like an hour. The next morning, I slid the photo into a book on my nightstand and didn't tell anyone I'd found it. I carried the weight of that sentence with me into the following week. And then, like clockwork, came Clayton's grand announcement at dinner. "We're going on a family camping trip," he said, slicing his steak as if the matter was already settled. 3 days in the Sawtooth Mountains. No phones, no distractions. Just us, fixing what's broken. Bailey wrinkled her nose. "Do we have to sleep in tents? Like actual tents?" "Survival builds character," Clayton replied with a smug grin, "and you'll get plenty of content for your channel." Suddenly, Bailey was all in. I should have said no. Everything in my gut told me this wasn't about bonding. It was about control. A performance. I'd seen that look in Clayton's eyes before, the way he grinned like he was 5 steps ahead of everyone in the room. But when I opened my mouth, it was Marcia who cut me off. "Don't be selfish, Janelle," she said. "Bailey wants this. We need to go as a family." That word, family, landed like a trap snapping shut. I nodded, just like I always did. My guilt overpowered my instinct. I told myself it was just 3 days. I'd survived 27 years in that house. What was another weekend? The night before we left, I stood in my bedroom, staring at the photo of my dad propped up against the lamp on my nightstand. The light was soft, golden, and it cast long shadows on the walls. I ran my thumb over the edge of the image, tracing the outline of his smile, the curve of my child-sized shoulders under his arm. And I whispered, barely aloud, "If I end up like him, maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing after all." I didn't know it yet, but that camping trip would be the moment my life cracked open. The last time I'd ever call that house home, and the first time I'd start wondering what it might feel like to belong somewhere, anywhere else. The Sawtooth Mountains rose in jagged lines against the blue Idaho sky, majestic, breathtaking, and cold. They reminded me of a painting you'd hang in a dentist's office. Beautiful, sure, but distant, detached. Silent witnesses to something much uglier than the view would suggest. The SUV ride-up was cramped and stifling. Bailey had claimed the front seat, where she perched like a queen, holding her phone high for her TikTok live stream. She narrated the trip with her usual fake cheer, "Road trip with the fam. Let's see if my sister survives the wilderness without Wi-Fi, guys." Her followers sent laughing emojis and flames, and I could hear the pings with every like. Meanwhile, I sat behind her, squished between 2 duffel bags, unseen and unspoken to. It felt like being a ghost in my own family. Clayton drove like he was on a mission, gripping the wheel with one hand and gesturing with the other as he lectured about resilience and family structure. He used that voice, the one he saved for dealership motivational speeches and manipulating my mother into silence. Marcia sat beside him, smiling like a fragile peace treaty. She tried to make small talk, but her eyes avoided mine the entire ride. When our glances accidentally met in the rearview mirror, she looked away fast, like my presence burned. By the time we pulled into the dirt clearing near the trailhead, I already knew something was wrong. I couldn't name it yet, but I could feel it, thick and sour like spoiled milk in my stomach. The trees stood tall and indifferent, and the mountains loomed like they were waiting for something to break. Bailey bounded out of the SUV with her phone still recording, twirling dramatically. "Wilderness aesthetic, nature detox, #camping queen." I stayed back, pulling out the gear like I always did, my arms already aching before the tent was even out of the bag. It didn't take long for the roles to fall into place. Clayton barking orders, Marcia offering fake encouragement, Bailey filming and smirking. And me? The help. I pitched both tents while Bailey filmed a hilarious skit about her loser sister who probably doesn't know how to light a fire. She got the content she wanted. I got dirt under my nails and a knot in my throat. Later, while I stirred chili over the camp stove, Bailey was live again, zooming in on my hunched back and saying, "Here's our chef/mule. 5-star forest service, right?" I turned slightly and muttered, "Could you not?" Just that. 3 words. Low and even. But Clayton caught it. He paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "This trip is to test us," he said slowly, almost thoughtfully. "Some will pass. Some..." He smirked. "Well, we'll see." That night, after dinner and more humiliating live streams, we sat by the fire. Or rather, they sat. I cleaned up. I was rinsing out a pot when Clayton stood and stretched. "We need more wood. Janelle, grab some. There's a clearing about 15 minutes back." I stared at him. "Alone? It's dark." His eyes narrowed. "Let's see if you can do at least that right." I turned to Marcia, hoping for backup. She looked down at her lap and said nothing. So I went. I didn't argue, didn't beg. I just grabbed a flashlight and walked into the trees, branches scraping my arms as I trudged through the underbrush. The wind whispered like it knew a secret I didn't want to hear. I told myself I'd be quick, 15 minutes max, and they'd all still be laughing by the fire when I returned. But when I got back, the campsite was gone. Not just the people, everything. The tents, the stove, the folding chairs, even the damn marshmallows, all packed up. The SUV was missing, tire tracks disappearing down the dirt road. On top of a flat rock near the fire pit sat a folded piece of notebook paper. In Sharpie, someone had written, "Let's see if she can survive a little wilderness adventure." I stood there, frozen, flashlight flickering. Then I saw it. Just beside the rock, tangled in the grass, was Bailey's silver bracelet, the one with the little star charm. She never took it off. Ever. My breath caught in my throat. She knew. She was in on it. This wasn't a prank gone wrong or a test of character. It was betrayal. Cold, cruel, deliberate. I sat down right there, on the damp ground, still holding the firewood I'd gathered. For the first hour, I thought maybe they'd come back. Maybe this was some sick joke, and they were watching from the trees, waiting for me to freak out so they could laugh about it on camera. But they didn't come back. 2 hours passed. The forest got darker. The cold crept into my bones. I had no tent, no sleeping bag, no water. Just a half-dead flashlight and a heart that had finally, irrevocably cracked open. I curled up near where the fire had been, wrapping my arms around my knees and trying to remember how to breathe. Images played in my head like a cruel slideshow. Getting locked out of the house for forgetting to take out the trash, Mom faking illness so I couldn't go to the state art competition, Bailey throwing my sketchbook in the trash in 6th grade. Every time I'd been pushed aside, silenced, made to feel like I was the problem. And for the first time, I said it out loud, even if only to the trees. If I survive this, I'll never go back. I'm not a joke. I'm not their test. The wind rustled in the branches above me, like it was listening, or maybe like it was finally answering. Dawn broke over the mountains, brushing pale gold across the jagged ridges like some gentle apology from a sky that didn't owe me one. I stood up slowly, every joint stiff, every muscle aching. My socks were damp from the dew, my shoes stiff with dirt, and my throat raw from thirst. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just picked a direction and started walking. Each step was a quiet rebellion. I didn't know where the trail led. I didn't even know what road I was hoping to find. But standing still wasn't an option. That would mean surrender. And even after everything, even after the humiliation, the betrayal, the bone-deep loneliness, I wasn't ready to give them that. My feet blistered before the sun had fully cleared the treetops. I wrapped them in torn strips from the hem of my shirt. I rationed the stale granola bar I found at the bottom of my coat pocket, chewing slowly, letting each bite linger like it might be the last. I kept walking. By midday, the trees began to thin. The air grew hotter, the ground flatter. Then, like some mirage, I saw a stretch of asphalt in the distance, a 2-lane highway cutting across nowhere. I waited at the roadside for what felt like hours, thumb out, nerves sharp. A few cars passed, too fast, eyes averted. Then a dusty 18-wheeler slowed. The engine growled low as it pulled onto the gravel shoulder, brakes hissing like a sigh. The driver leaned out his window. Mid-60s maybe, with gray stubble and kind eyes. He studied me carefully before saying, "You okay, sweetheart?" I nodded, then shook my head. "I need a ride to the nearest town." He didn't ask more, just opened the door and said, "Name's Roy. You can sit up front, long as you don't mind country radio." Inside the cab, the air smelled like coffee and worn leather. I sat stiffly, cradling my arms across my chest, not yet ready to fall apart. Roy didn't press me. He talked about the weather, the wildfires up north, how he hated Idaho gas prices. I appreciated the noise. It made me feel less like I'd cracked in half. He dropped me off at a gas station just outside a town that barely existed. One main road, one diner, a post office, and this place, with buzzing lights, dusty snack shelves, and a teenage clerk half asleep behind the counter. I borrowed the phone. I stared at the keypad, thumb hovering over the digits I knew by heart, Mom's number. But I didn't press them. I didn't even want to hear her voice. Instead, I dialed a number I hadn't called in over a decade, one that lived in a forgotten corner of my mind, tucked away with all the things I wasn't supposed to remember. The phone rang once, twice. Then a voice, low, gruff, familiar. "Robin." I almost choked. "It's me. It's Janelle." A pause. Then, "Where are you?" I gave her the name of the gas station, barely more than a crossroads. She didn't hesitate. "I'll come. You're not theirs anymore." I sat down on the curb outside, staring at the ground as truck tires hummed past. That phrase rang in my ears. "You're not theirs anymore." Like an incantation. Like a door swinging open somewhere I hadn't known existed. Inside the gas station, a small TV bolted to the wall played the afternoon news. The volume was low, but I could read the captions. "Local man reports daughter missing in Sawtooth Mountains. Mental health concerns suspected." They were already rewriting the story. Clayton had gone to the police. Said I ran off. Said I was unstable. Of course he had. I stood there staring at the screen, mouth dry. It wasn't enough that they'd left me. Now they wanted to paint me as broken, dangerous, unhinged, a liability to be dismissed, pitied, or feared. A group of college-age hikers filtered into the station, laughing and sweaty. One of them, a guy in a backwards cap, glanced at me, his brow furrowed. Then his face lit up with recognition. "Wait, are you that loser sister from TikTok?" I looked at him for a long second. Then I smiled. "Not anymore." He blinked, confused, then shrugged and moved on. Outside, the sun dipped low. Roy was long gone, but I stayed on that curb until the sky turned lavender and headlights flickered in the distance. A beat-up Jeep Wrangler pulled up. Robin got out slowly, her boots crunching the gravel. She was older than I remembered, hair streaked with silver and pulled into a loose braid. Her face was weathered, but her eyes, they were steady, like stone. She didn't hug me, didn't rush to ask what happened. She just opened the passenger door. "You hungry?" I nodded. We drove most of the way in silence. No music, no questions. But once, when I glanced into the side mirror, I saw her watching me, not with pity, not with disbelief, but with something else. Recognition, like someone who'd once walked through fire and could still smell the smoke on me. And for the first time, I let myself believe, maybe, just maybe, I hadn't been burned beyond repair. Oregon's pine-scented air felt like freedom, but I wasn't sure I knew how to breathe it yet. The mountains in the distance didn't loom like sawtooth. They stood steady, calm, as if they weren't interested in testing me, as if they might actually let me exist in peace. Robin's cabin sat just outside Bend, tucked between rows of lodgepole pines and flanked by a creek that whispered more than it rushed. It was small, crooked in some places, and smelled faintly of cedar smoke and old books. She called it her escape pod. It had no air conditioning, but the breeze through the screen door made the whole place feel like it exhaled for you. Inside, shelves buckled under the weight of novels and field guides. A cast-iron stove stood in the corner, still warm from earlier. Two ancient cats, Pickle and Moss, barely glanced up when I walked in. Robin handed me a blanket, set a chipped mug of chamomile tea in front of me, and said, "There's the couch. Bathrooms to the left. If the cats snore, don't take it personal." She didn't ask me to explain what happened. That night, I stared at the knotty pine ceiling and listened to the creaks of the house settling. I thought about Utah, the suffocating silence around our dinner table, the way Bailey laughed through cruelty like it was currency. But mostly, I thought about how I wasn't there anymore. The next morning, Robin slid a piece of paper across the breakfast table. A list of local places hiring. Nothing glamorous, just handwritten names and phone numbers. "This ain't a spa," she said, sipping her coffee. "Work heals more than pity." I started at a local co-op on the edge of town, ringing up quinoa and handmade soaps for sunburned hikers and retired professors who brought their own jars. It was honest, quiet work. No one barked orders. No one rolled their eyes when I spoke. The manager, Cynthia, smiled with her whole face. That's where I met Travis Cole. He fixed the delivery trucks, broad shoulders, quiet hands, and a voice like worn flannel. He always said my name, like it mattered. "Morning, Janelle Harper." Not sweetie or hey. Just my full name, like he was anchoring me back into the world. We didn't talk much at first, just nodded. Then he brought me a thermos of coffee one morning after my shift. Said he noticed I looked tired. It wasn't a move, it was kindness. The difference was startling. A few weeks in, Robin asked me to go up into the attic to fetch a box of old Christmas lights. I hadn't been up there before. The air was dust thick and smelled like mothballs and forgotten things. In the far corner, behind a trunk of sweaters and a broken easel, I found a small cardboard box. Written on the top in black marker, L. Harper. Return to sender. Inside were letters, dozens of them, yellowed with age, bound by twine. They were from Lila Harper, my grandmother. I hadn't heard that name in over a decade. I'd barely remembered she existed. She had written to me. The earliest letter was from the year after my father died. Lila had sent drawings, poems, even pressed flowers between the folds. Each envelope had been opened, then resealed. All had been addressed to me in a child's handwriting. Robin found me on the attic floor, surrounded by paper ghosts. "She sent them here once your mom stopped taking her calls," Robin said quietly. I didn't have the heart to throw them away. One letter stopped me cold. Lila had written, "Your father set up a small trust fund in your name, Janelle, just in case. He wanted you to chase your art even if your mom didn't see the point. If you're reading this, I hope you found it before she spent it." I didn't cry. I didn't storm out to confront Marcia or scream down the phone. I just folded the letter, placed it gently back in the box, and carried it downstairs. That night, I sat at Robin's kitchen table and opened my old sketchbook, the one I hadn't touched since high school. The pages were brittle. Most were blank, but I remembered the feeling of charcoal between my fingers, the ache in my wrist after hours lost in shapes and shadows. I sharpened a pencil. I drew the man from the photo I kept by my bed. My father's face, the soft eyes and crooked smile I remembered only in pieces. I drew him not as he was, but as I imagined he would have looked today, sitting beside me, proud. It was the first time I'd drawn in over 10 years. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. That night, before bed, I tucked the sketch under my pillow like a secret, a tether. Something that whispered, "You are not what they said. You are not what they left. You are becoming." My hands, once bound by chores, now held tools to carve my own future. That thought came to me the first morning I woke up in my tiny trailer tucked behind Mrs. Donnelly's cottage. The walls were thin enough to hear the crows tapping at the roof, and the floor tilted slightly when I walked from the bed to the sink. But the morning sun poured in like a soft promise, and no one yelled at me to make breakfast. That silence tasted like honey. I paid Mrs. Donnelly a modest rent, and she left baked scones by my door every Sunday like clockwork. "You remind me of me," she said once, before waddling away with her cane tapping against the walkway. I never asked what she meant. I had a feeling I already knew. Around the same time, Travis offered me a part-time gig at his garage. At first, it was sweeping floors and restocking shelves. I didn't mind. The smell of oil and metal was grounding, like something real and practical had finally found me. One afternoon, he handed me a ratchet and nodded toward an old pickup. "Want to try changing the spark plugs?" I hesitated. He shrugged. "You've got steady hands, Harper. That's rare." There was something freeing about getting my hands dirty on my own terms. No one was hovering. No one was mocking. Just bolts, grease, and focus. At night, I sat at the fold-out table in my trailer and balanced Travis's old laptop on a stack of cookbooks. I'd enrolled in an online accounting course, using a scholarship Robin quietly applied for in my name. Numbers had always felt like puzzles I didn't mind solving, and this time, they weren't being used against me. One night, after updating invoices for Travis, I caught myself thinking, I'm not surviving anymore. I'm building. The first real test came a few months later, when Travis mentioned Big Al's Auto, the mega garage in town that was trying to price him out of business. He said their supplier bills never quite added up. I offered to take a look. He was hesitant at first, but I'd already seen the mess in his filing cabinet. 3 hours and a few spreadsheets later, I found the pattern. Duplicated part numbers, inflated pricing, kickbacks. We filed a report with the local trade commission. 2 weeks later, Big Al's got slapped with a formal audit and a fine. Travis didn't say much, just handed me a fresh wrench set and muttered, "You're more than good with numbers." I was starting to believe him. Then, the past cracked its knuckles and knocked on my door again. One night, just after midnight, my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. I almost let it ring out, but something told me to answer. "This is Dylan Reeves," the voice said. "Clayton's son. I know what he did to you, and I know what he did to me." I didn't say a word. He continued, his voice low, careful. "I was 17 when he kicked me out. Said I stole from him. I didn't. I swear. I've got things you need to see. I hit record before replying. Why are you calling me now? Because I saw your name in a news clip. I figured you didn't know the whole story. The call ended abruptly. I sat there staring at the ceiling, wondering how many other lives Clayton had buried beneath his fake smiles and twisted sermons on family. A few days later, a package arrived at Mrs. Donnelly's, forwarded from Utah by a neighbor who still remembered me. Inside were old school papers, a few half-used sketch pads, and one folder I hadn't seen since high school. In it was a drawing, unfinished, but vivid in my memory. A sketch I'd poured my heart into at 16, the kind you don't realize is confessional until years later. My hands had shaped that girl's eyes, her sorrow, her hope. But across the center, written in red Sharpie, someone, Bailey of course, had scrawled, "Nobody wants you." I stared at it for a long time. Then I pinned it to the wall of my trailer right above my desk. I didn't erase the words. I didn't cover them. I wanted to see them every day, not as a wound, but as a dare. Nobody wants you? Maybe that used to be true, but now I wanted me, and that was a start. 3 years later, I thought I'd outrun my family, until their ghosts came knocking. By 30, I'd built something of a life. Not flashy, not Instagram-worthy, but mine. My mobile accounting business served small garages and body shops from Bend to Sisters, Oregon. I drove a rusty but reliable pickup with my logo on the side, and I wore my name like armor, Janelle Harper, small-town CFO. A local newspaper did a piece on me. From Grease to Growth, the headline read, featuring a photo of me standing beside a half-restored '67 Mustang. Travis stood just out of frame, per his usual preference. Then came the email. Subject line, "Bailey's in trouble. We need you." I stared at it for an hour before opening it. The message was short and manipulative in that unique Marsha way. Bailey had been hit with a lawsuit for selling fraudulent crypto coins through TikTok. Clayton had declared bankruptcy. They were in crisis. She ended with, "You're still family." I didn't reply. Not right away. Instead, I picked up the phone and called a number I'd never used before, the one from Lila's last letter. She answered after 3 rings. Her voice was sharper than I expected. Clear. Steady. "This is Lila Harper," she said. "It's Janelle." A long pause, then a breath. "You sound like your father." I asked her about the trust fund, the one he supposedly left for me. She didn't hesitate. "He left it in good faith. But Marsha and Clayton restructured it when you were a minor. The money was supposed to be yours at 18. They siphoned it off under guardianship clauses. I tried to stop it." I felt the words settle like stones in my gut. "Why didn't you ever call me?" "They made sure I couldn't. Changed your number. Told people I was unstable. I wrote. I hoped you'd find the letters." I had. Too late. 2 days later, Dylan Reeves showed up in Bend. He found me at the cafe near the co-op, sat across from me like we'd known each other in a different life. He was older now, worn around the eyes, but his posture had a quiet defiance I recognized. "Clayton made me the villain when I was a kid," he said. "Said I stole car parts, drugs, whatever he needed that week. I ran. Never looked back." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were records, financial statements, forged signatures, altered documents, all under Harper Family Trust, all pointing back to Clayton. "He used the trust to fund the dealership," Dylan said. "On paper, it looked like a family business. In reality, he drained it." I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I scanned every page, took photos, made notes. Then I thanked Dylan and walked out into the bright Oregon sun. At home, I laid everything out on the kitchen table: emails, letters, documents. I organized them into folders. I made copies. I labeled flash drives. I wasn't sure yet what I was going to do with it all. But I knew this much. Next time they came looking for help, they weren't going to find the girl they left in the woods. They were going to meet the woman who walked out. The Boise diner was neutral ground, but I was armed with truths sharper than any knife. I chose the diner in Boise because it sat exactly halfway between our two worlds, the one I built and the one I left behind. The chipped booths and faded menus made it feel like time had stalled, like the place itself was waiting for someone to finally say what should have been said years ago. Robin came with me, but only as a silent witness. She ordered coffee, sat 2 booths down, and didn't look our way again. That was her way of giving strength without suffocating it. When I walked in, Marcia stood up too quickly and wrapped her arms around me like a bad actress playing a mother on a daytime soap. I didn't hug back. Clayton, still in his stiff collared shirt and dealership tie, leaned back and went straight to the point. "We need $20,000, he said. "You can help." No hello, no apology, just a request packaged like a demand. Marcia chimed in, voice trembling. Bailey was taken advantage of. She didn't know what she was doing. She's just a girl. Bailey cut in, her eyes like polished ice. "You're acting like we abandoned you. It was just a joke. You took it too far." It was then the door behind us opened, and a voice rang out like the crack of a judge's gavel. No, it wasn't. Kendra Walsh stepped inside. I hadn't seen her since high school, but I knew the face. A little older, tired around the mouth, and holding a toddler on her hip. Her eyes flicked to Bailey, then to me. "She's lying," Kendra said. "Clayton pressured Bailey into the crypto scam to save the dealership. They both knew what they were doing. They used your name, your history, to sell this image of a reformed family business." Bailey flinched but didn't deny it. She looked down, twisting a silver ring. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope. Quietly, I slid it across the table. Clayton opened it. Inside was a check for $18.75. Bus fare from Sawtooth to Ogden, Utah, dated 3 years ago. "That's what you're worth to me," I said. Clayton's jaw tightened. His voice was low and dangerous. "You think this makes you better than us?" Marcia collapsed into herself, sobbing. "We're still your family." Bailey scoffed. "Whatever. You were never really one of us anyway." Kendra took a seat beside me. She didn't speak, just watched me the way someone might watch a storm they've lived through before. Quiet, respectful, unsure whether it's truly over. I stood. There was nothing more to say. The play was over. They'd shown me the script too many times. I knew every act, every lie. Outside, Boise was soaked in rain. Travis had pulled up in our truck and waited without a word. I climbed in beside him. Robin slid into the back, dripping but calm. "You okay?" she asked softly. I looked at her, at the rain streaking the windshield like melted glass, and I said it aloud, for the first time without doubt. "I finally am." Freedom tasted sweet, but I couldn't shake the bitter aftertaste of their collapse. The drive back to Bend was silent for a long while. The tires hummed against wet pavement, and pine trees blurred past in a quiet rhythm. I stared out the window, unsure whether I felt lighter or simply emptied. Travis didn't break the silence until we turned onto our road. "You know this doesn't define you, right?" he said. I looked at him. Number but ending it does. A few days later, Lila Harper arrived in Oregon. She wore a gray coat, a wool hat, and smelled faintly of lavender. We met under the tall trees behind Robin's house, the wind tangling her silver hair. She handed me a small wooden box, the kind meant for keepsakes, not treasures. Inside were a few photographs of my father, young, thoughtful, wire-rimmed glasses, standing beside a half-finished painting. And beneath them, folded legal documents with notations in his handwriting. "It's not much," Lila said, "but it's yours. It always was." The inheritance was modest, fractured by years of theft and deceit, but I pooled it with my savings and Travis's careful budgeting. Together, we put a down payment on a small house on the edge of town. It had a tilted roof, a backyard with a stone well, and an old shed that I immediately claimed as my future art studio. We began to rebuild, not just spaces, but lives. Meanwhile, the past continued its slow public collapse. News spread about Bailey's lawsuits, about Clayton's vanished dealership, about tax fraud and fake investments. Locals shared memes, former followers unfollowed. One night, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. A minute later, a text appeared. "I'm sorry, please talk to me. Mom." I let the screen go dark. There was nothing in her apology I hadn't already survived. A week later, Dylan met me again at the cafe. He slid a tabloid across the table. The headline screamed, "Crypto Scandal Exposes Family Secrets, the Harper Collapse." "I sent it in," he said. Not proud, but it felt fair. I nodded. "We do what we need to, then we move on." That night, Travis and I finally finished restoring the '67 Mustang. Its turquoise paint shimmered under the garage lights. We named it Phoenix. As I screwed on the license plate, I whispered, "Let this thing carry me forward." We took it for a drive out past the river, the air cool and clean, the future cracking open like dawn. Back home, I stood in the shed that would soon be my studio. I taped a new drawing to the wall, a portrait of my father smiling faintly, a brush in hand, hovering over an unfinished canvas. This one I drew from memory, but this time I completed it. "I finished it for you," I whispered. And this time I meant it. For both of us. The Oregon coast roared with possibility, and I was finally ready to answer its call. We didn't send out invitations, no registry, no floral arch, just a few folding chairs, a driftwood altar, and the Oregon wind tangling my veil as if nature itself were blessing the moment. Travis and I said our vows with the sea crashing behind us and no audience except the ones who mattered. Robin officiated, solemn and smiling. Lila snapped photos with an old film camera that had once belonged to her late husband, squinting through the viewfinder like she could see time bending. Kendra, now apprenticing at a local bakery, brought a small lemon blueberry cake dusted with mint and kindness. I stood with people who had not raised me, but who had shown up when I needed raising the most. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at them. No blood ties, no shared last names, and I said, "Family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up, stays, and lets you grow." There were tears, yes, but not the kind that fall from regret. These were the kind that came with peace. A week later, a letter arrived. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Bailey. "I know I messed up," it read. "I was just a kid. I didn't know what I was doing. Mom's in a bad way. I wish we could go back to when we were little. Please write back." But something about it rang false. The wording, the rhythm of guilt without accountability, was almost familiar. I pulled out an old letter Clayton once wrote to Lila, tucked in the memory box she'd given me. The similarities were chilling, word for word in places. The same emotional bait, the same passive apologies. Not remorse. Manipulation. That night, I lit a fire in the wood stove behind my studio. I held the letter until the flame licked my fingertips. As the ash drifted upward, I whispered, "Some bridges are meant to burn, especially if you never want to cross back." A few days later, a package arrived. No sender, just my name and address scrawled on brown paper. Inside was my old sketchbook from childhood, the one Bailey had torn apart years ago. Now it had been carefully restored. Pages laminated, creases flattened. One drawing survived untouched. My father, smiling faintly, brush in hand. I didn't know who sent it. Maybe Dylan, maybe Kendra, maybe Bailey. But for once, I didn't need to know. The gesture was enough. I framed the drawing and hung it in our home, right by the window that faced the sea. With some of the money left from the inheritance and my growing business, I started something small, something real. The Harper Boundaries Fund. A scholarship for girls like me, those who'd survived families that fed on silence and shame, who wanted to learn a trade, build a life. At the town hall during our launch event, I stood in front of a modest crowd and said, "It's not about running away, it's about choosing what you'll run toward." And for the first time, I saw nods from strangers who understood. As the waves crashed, I saw not an end, but a beginning I built from the ashes of betrayal. The road wound through pine and rock as Travis and I drove the Mustang, our Phoenix, back toward the Sawtooth Mountains. It had been 3 years since I was left there like a forgotten backpack. The forest had grown greener, the air clearer. We found the clearing, just off an unmarked trail. Grass now covered what was once scorched earth. The fire pit had crumbled to stones. Nature had erased their cruelty. "You sure you want to be here?" Travis asked, his voice low. I nodded. I need to see it from the other side of the story. From my bouquet, I pulled a handful of dried petals, roses, lavender, eucalyptus. I knelt and let them fall onto the earth. No prayers, no speeches, just silence. Letting go didn't need words. On the drive home, we crested a hill just as the sun dipped below the ridge, casting a soft orange glow over the valley. Travis stopped the car without a word. I opened my sketchbook, flipped to a fresh page, and drew. It was me, sitting on the roof of the Mustang, hair tangled in wind, eyes fixed on the horizon. Below, I wrote, "Not the girl who got left behind, the woman who kept walking." Months later, that sketch hung in a gallery space in a seaside town, next to paintings of the Sawtooth, Robin's herb garden, Travis's garage, Kendra's bakery display, and the finished portrait of my father. A brass plate below read, "Artist Janelle Harper, founder, Harper Boundaries Fund." And still, life unfolded. In the final scene, I stood barefoot on the sand, letting the waves kiss my toes. The Pacific roared like it had something to tell me. I closed my eyes, let the wind lift my hair, and whispered. They thought it would be funny to leave me behind. They didn't know they'd set me free.